Well, thank you very much, Chanel, and welcome everyone to our Retro Mushrooms class. I am going to be painting our mushrooms on a little wood cookie, and hopefully you have your design already transferred onto your cookie. And Chanel is now going to switch us to our overhead view so that we can get started. And we are going to try to get this painting done in just about an hour. I never promised that, but hopefully we'll be in good shape. So I'm going to put some of my paint out on my palette now. I'm going to start by putting out some white to begin with, and I'm going to use a number 12 flat brush, and we're going to undercoat the white parts of our mushrooms. So we're going to load our brush with just enough white paint to cover the wood cookie, but we don't need a mountain of paint on there. Now, I did not prep this little wood cookie in any way, so my paint is going to be absorbed into the raw wood surface rather quickly, and we are going to use that to our advantage this evening. So go ahead, I'm using a number 12 flat brush. If that seems too big for you, you can shift down to a number 10 or possibly a number 8, but I would like you to use the largest brush that you can possibly be comfortable with. And I'm starting to undercoat the gills on this larger mushroom. And to make a very bad joke, if you want to know what kind of mushrooms these are, you need to go ask Alice. I think she'll know. I don't remember. I looked it up today and I cannot remember what they are. But they are a bright, happy little mushroom. They're very bright and really a very cute little mushroom for us to get working on tonight. So we're undercoating the gills, and I'm just working that white into the grain of my wood cookie. And now I'm going to leave this area alone, and I'm going to shift down here, and I'm going to paint in the bottom of my toadstool stems, or mushroom stems, or stalks, whichever you want to call them. And again, just pat and work that white into the raw wood. So far, we are not doing anything tough, very easy painting. And this is going to dry very, very quickly. And as I mentioned, we're going to use that to our advantage. All right, so moving over here to this other little mushroom and painting its stem, and it is fatter at the bottom. These mushrooms do have fat stems where they come out of the ground. And these mushrooms take me back to my early days as a student of decorative painting. We had classes where we met once a week for 3 hours, and you had your first set of classes was 6 weeks long, and we didn't do mushrooms in those, but in your second set of classes, that was another 6-week session, we did paint mushrooms. So this is going way back for me. All right, and I'm going to come back up here and I'm going to paint the section of the stem that's above this little mushroom cap here and goes to the tall mushroom. Try not to get the white paint into the area of the red cap of the mushroom. If you can stay out of that, that will be great. Again, try to stay out of the red cap of the mushroom as you paint your stems. Try to be into that red in no time at all. All right, so holding this up close for you all to see, this is what my mushrooms look like right now. So I'm going to give you just a minute to catch up with me, and then we'll start shading our mushrooms. So the mushrooms, the gills and the stems were all just base coated with white. And I didn't put my brush in water. I've just laid it off to the side. And in just another minute, we're going to start shading on our mushroom stems and the gills. So I don't want anyone to feel incredibly rushed, but just we all feel the time pressure. I was using a number 12 flat brush. Okay, so my white areas are just about dry, and that's because we're working on unsealed wood. Now, I've added two colors to my palette. I've added some honeycomb, and I've added a little bit of black. Now, I didn't have black on your supply list, but I think most of you probably have a black acrylic that you can use. So that's what we're going with. All right, so what I'm going to do is load my brush with my titanium white. If you don't have honeycomb, you can use any dark tan color. All right, so I've got white on my brush, and I'm going to stroke 1/2 of the brush into the honeycomb. And when I move that down to my palette, you can see that I'm creating a gradient right here on my palette. Now I want this to be a little darker, so I'm going to scooch that same honeycomb color or side of the brush into a little bit of black. And now we've created a super dark brown color. And I'm going to show you exactly what I'm going to do with this shading color. I am going to put it right next to the stem on the gills of the mushroom. So that's exactly what that looks like. And I'm going to do the same thing over here on the other side of the stem. All right, so you can see that I've shaded the gills on both sides of the stem. And now I'm going to pick up, I'm going to make sure I know what's going on my brush, just paying attention to what's happening here on the palette. And I'm going to pick up a little bit more white and soften that in. And I'm going to carry this shading color right up underneath the cap of the mushroom. Okay, so that's what that looks like. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side of the stem. Just making sure the dark color is right up against the cap of the mushroom. All right, so that's what it looks like. It's not terribly pretty at this point, but we're okay. So giving you another minute to catch up with me. And I'm just going to wipe my brush on my shop towel. And I'm going to pick up some white on my brush. Not much paint. And I'm going to pat this little bit of white on, and I'm going to soften that shading. So if you look, this side has had the little additional white and shaded or softened that color. This half has not. So take a look and see what that looks like. And I'm going to do the same thing over here now. Just pick up a very small amount of white, and I'm going to basically just soften that shading. And I'm not really blending it in that much. Mainly this little brush kind of look a little bit of a skimming over of the dark shading color with the white. Okay, hope everybody's with me. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to put the gills in the mushroom. So right here on my palette where I had my honeycomb with that tiny bit of black in it, I'm just picking up that color, and I'm going to start using the chisel edge of the brush and creating the little gill lines. All right, so I've done a couple. Can you see those little lines there? Let's see if I can get it to focus a little better. There we go. So you see those two little lines? I'm going to make a series of those little lines using the chisel edge of my brush. And if I need a little bit more paint, I can pick that up. Ooh, don't see, I got it way too dark there. So I'm going to come back and pick up some honeycomb and white. So I want this to be darker than my white, but I don't want it to be so dark that they look like really black lines on there. So we want it to look like a soft kind of gray-brown color. And I'm just using the chisel edge of the brush, and I'm making these little curved lines just like that. And we're not done, but we're getting started. And we're going to do the same thing over here on the other side of my mushroom. All right, so you could see those little lines there. And I'm going to wipe my brush off. I'm going to pick up a little bit of white. And I'm going to take most of that white off my brush so I have almost nothing on my brush. And I'm going to start at the edge, and at the edge over here, opposite the red cap of the mushroom. And I'm going to just pull some of this dry brush of white across those gill lines, because I want to make those lines less apparent. So what I've done is just brushed a little bit of white on there to make those lines less noticeable. And when you get your cookie crumbs on your palette, just kind of brush them off so that they won't be in your paint in a minute. All right, I'll give you 1 minute to catch up with me there. So we've just about finished the gills underneath the taller mushrooms. And then we're going to shade the stems of our mushrooms in just a second. But I'm going to let you catch up with me. Okay, so I'm thinking that all of you are caught up with me, and we are now going to make our same shading color again. So I'm loading my brush with some white, and then I'm going to sneak into the honeycomb, and I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of black on that same corner of the brush, and we're just darkening our honeycomb a little bit. So we've got white on our brush, and then we've made one half of the brush a little bit darker with some honeycomb and a tiny bit of black. All right, so let's do the easiest stem first. That'll be our short little stem. And I'm going to pat that dark color right up underneath the cap of the mushroom. And because I've got white on the other half of the brush, this should blend pretty easily into our mushroom stem. So you can see it right there. It's softened right down in. And then I'm going to shade the left side of my mushroom stem, which is going to be my darker side. And this is darker than I want it, so I'm going to stop because I can already tell it's darker than I would like it to be. So I'm going to pick up some more white and work that into my brush to lighten everything up. And I'm just patting and softening that dark color onto the left side of my mushroom stem. So that's what it looks like. I'll let you work on that, and I am going to repeat the same process on the bottom section of my stem and on the top section. So wherever this taller stem goes underneath a red cap, we are going to shade there. So let me show you what that actually looks like. I'm going to shade right underneath the cap down here. Just going to bring that right across and pat that color down so that I have a smooth transition of my shading color there. And I'm going to do it on both ends of the stem. If you're running out of paint like I am, I'm going to pick up more white, more honeycomb, and also just a little tiny bit of black. All right, so I'm going to shade behind that front mushroom cap. And once again, I'm going to blend that in as I go so that I get a nice transition of color. All right, see what that looks like. And then I'm going to do the same thing up here under the top, that top mushroom cap. And I'm going to pat and blend that so that I get a nice, smooth transition of color. Now there's one more place, well, there's two more places actually that we're going to add a little bit of this shading. And that is along the left side of this tall stem. Just like we did down here, we're going to do on both sections of the taller stem. And it does not take much to get that stem shaded. Okay, so that's what our little mushroom stems look like right now. We got a little bit more to do to them, and then we're going to get on to the colorful part of our painting. Because right now, this could not be any more bland than it is. We've got a nice wood tone background that's pretty light, and then all of this kind of grayish mushroom stem on there. So I'm going to give you another minute and let you catch up, and that's going to give my paint time to get really sticky and dry. So again, don't put your brush in water, but I am going to wipe it out really, really well. And let me give you a little pro tip. So 1, 2, 3, eyes on me, watch your screen. When I really want to wipe out my brush, I will put my brush flat down on my shop towel, fold the towel over the brush, and then pinch the bristles and pull through, and that will get most of the paint out of my brush. But if you do it that way, you don't get paint all over your hands and on anything else that you don't want paint, or anywhere else you don't want paint. Okay, I'm ready to move on. So what I'm going to do is pick up a little bit of white paint on my brush, and I'm going to tap the excess off on my shop towel so I have very, very little white paint on my brush. And I'm going to take this white paint, this very small amount of white paint, and I'm going to just very gently drag a little bit of a white highlight on that mushroom stem. So I think you can see where that's going on there. And I'll do it down here on the bottom of the stem. Just lay the brush flat down, and if you don't have much paint, you can't take much paint off, and that's exactly the amount of paint we want. Not much, just enough to skim a little dry brush highlight of white on that mushroom stem. And then we'll do one on this chubby little mushroom stem over here the same way. Very small amount of paint on the brush. Lay the brush flat down and just let that light color skim across, and you'll get a delightful little highlight on that mushroom stem. All right, let me bring that up so that you can see all of those little stems have that little white highlight on it. There you go. Now you can really get a good look at that. And if you want to, we can come back to the gills of our mushroom, and if those lines are still pretty bright, you can just skim a little bit of white over that gill area, and that will help soften those gill lines. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with mine. My gill lines are a little bit obstructed, and everything is nice and tidy. Whew, it's a lot of painting, but we are getting into the fun stuff next. So I'm going to go down to a number 8 flat brush, and I'm going to put some apple red on my palette. I'm also going to put out a little bit of pure orange. And while I'm putting paint out on my palette, I might as well go ahead and put out some berry wine. So everything we need for our mushroom caps we've got on our palette now. So I'm going to take my number 8 flat brush and apple red, and I'm going to paint in the cap of one mushroom with the apple red. So if you've transferred your little spots on there, that's okay. This apple red probably will not cover your transfer lines. Also, don't use a ton of paint. You just want enough paint to let it sink into the wood cookie and cover the wood. So I'm using the chisel edge of the brush to get the outside edge nice and smooth. So we don't want the edge of our mushroom cap to be fuzzy. We want it to be nice and crisp. So you want to use a small amount of paint, just enough to cover the mushroom cap. and then stretch that paint out so that you have a nice thin application of paint on the mushroom cap. Excuse me.
And what was the red color called again?
This is apple red. If you don't have apple red, you can use any bright holiday red or what you might consider a primary red color. All right, so that's one mushroom cap painted in, and I'm going to go ahead and do the other one at the same time. So again, use the chisel edge of your brush to get the outside edge nice and smooth, and then stretch that color out across the mushroom cap. So again, stretch that paint out so that it can be absorbed into the wood pretty quickly. And that's going to make painting everything a little easier because everything's going to be drying really, really quickly. Okay, we have both of our mushroom caps painted in with apple red, and I'm going to give you a minute to catch up with me. And again, I'm just wiping those little cookie crumbs off. Okay, we are halfway through our class time, and we are doing really, really well. So what I want to do next is to add some light color to my mushroom cap. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of pure orange on my number 8 flat that I have not put in water. I just wiped out the red on my shop towel. And now I'm picking up some of this orange. And I'm going to apply the orange along the front edge of this mushroom cap right down here. And I'm going to pat and soften that orange color into my apple red. All right, so that's how that mushroom cap looks. It's kind of hard to see, but I've lightened the front edge of it. And I'm going to do the same thing on this upper mushroom cap. I'm just going to start right about here, and I'm going to carry that over. Our apple red is not dry, but it's just been absorbing into the wood grain, so it makes it easier to apply my orange. I've got a little much on my brush, so I wipe that off, and I can just kind of blend with a firm touch, and that will soften that orange into the mushroom cap itself. So those are both highlighted, which was not very difficult. And so I'm going to let you have a moment to do that. And then we will add some shading onto our caps. So this is a medium-sized wood cookie. They also make smaller wood cookies that are about, I don't know, maybe 4 inches across. And you could just do the single little mushroom there on the smaller wood cookies if you wanted to. And these would make, a very cute little addition to your kitchen decor. Or if you wanted to, you could use them on a package that you are giving to a hostess. You could write a lovely little message on the back of this and, attach a little cord to it and tie it on like a jug of wine or something like that, or a big bottle of olive oil or something like that. If you're taking a hostess gift, make a nice gift tag on that as well. But now it's time to shade our mushroom cap. So I'm going to pick up a little berry wine, and I'm mainly having that on one half of the flat brush. And what I'm going to do is take that half of the brush and start right along the top edge and tap and pat that color on and soften it in as I go. So let me show you, if hopefully you can see that. Right along the top there where I've just started. And we will continue that down the left side of my mushroom cap. And I'm tapping and patting, and I'm using a firm pressure to do this. And it is creating a very nice shaded area, but I don't have a harsh, dark line on my mushroom cap. Okay, I'm going to take that same berry wine that I've picked up just on half of my brush, and I'm going to do the same thing on the top of the taller mushroom. I'm not going all the way over to the right, but kind of where that little bulge starts there. And I'm tapping and patting and softening the shading color as I apply it across the top edge of the mushroom cap. And again, you will need to probably use a firm pressure to make this happen.
How could you make a berry wine color?
You could add a little black to your apple red, or you could use any other dark burgundy color that you might have handy, whether it's berry wine or true burgundy or black cherry. So lots of different color options for you there. All right, now you can see I've got the top of both of my little mushrooms shaded with my berry wine, and the front edges are highlighted with my pure orange. So I'm going to give you a minute to let you catch up there. And we are then going to start putting our little white spots on our mushrooms, on our mushroom caps, that is. But I don't want you to feel terribly rushed, just a little rushed. And if you go online and you look at pictures of mushrooms and toadstools, you'll find all kinds of interesting color combinations that you could use on more mushrooms that you want to paint. You don't have to just do this red and white combination, although it is among the prettiest that are out there. And I wanted you all to be able to paint the prettiest mushrooms that you could. Okay, so I think you've had a minute, and this feels pretty dry to me, and we're not having to use a hair dryer or a heat tool or anything like that. It's soaking right in to the unsealed surface of the wood. Now, instead of painting our spots white to begin with, we are going to paint the shadow of our little spots, because these spots are kind of raised up areas. You could think of them sort of like little warts on our toadstool or mushroom caps. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a liner brush and some water, and I'm going to take a little bit of my berry wine, and I just want this to be a little looser in consistency. And I'm also going to add just a speck of black to this because I want this to be a little bit darker, but I want it to be burgundy and not black. All right, so trying to caution all of you not to make this too dark. So it's still burgundy, but we've just made it a little extra dark. All right, so now I've got this color on my liner brush, and you are probably going to end up wanting to use your index finger or a finger, and I'll show you what we're going to do with our finger in just a second. I'm going to go along the left-hand side of my little white wart, and I'm just going to tap some dark color on. There, you can see that. And then I'm going to take my index finger and just press on that, and that's going to soften that dark color right into the wood. All right, so I'm going to do right around the left side of another spot, or another one of those little warts, and then I'm going to take my index finger and just tap, and that's setting these little shadows into the red cap of the mushroom, and also softening that, taking the excess off. So this is just a little trick that's going to make our spots a bit more 3D. So tapping along the left side and maybe along the bottom. And then once I've put that on, just a quick little tap with my index finger to soften that. And I'm doing that right around all of the little white little warts or spots on the cap. So it's along the left-hand side and kind of along the bottom. And I will bring this up for a close-up in just a second. What you don't want this is for it to look like they've completely been outlined. So that's why tapping with your index finger really helps. It just softens everything. All right, so let me bring this up for a close-up. There you can see those little dark shadowing areas on the cap around our little white spots. And I'm going to do the same thing on this lower mushroom as well, just along the left and kind of underneath the little white areas. And try not to make these too regular or too smooth. You want it to have a little bit of texture, and it'll look a little bit more interesting that way. And no two mushroom caps are going to look exactly the same, and I couldn't paint two of them the same way no matter how hard I try. And nobody's going to be looking at your painting, criticizing the little dark shading areas around these white mushroom caps. Everybody's going to be looking at your painting going, oh my God, that's so cute. And they don't really care exactly how you did it. They're just going to be amazed that you created such cute little mushrooms in just about an hour. All right, so we've got our little spots on both caps kind of shaded, and I'm going to now rinse out my liner brush, and I'm going to pick up some white on that liner brush, and we are going to add the white spots to our mushroom caps. Now, I'm not really thinning my white down. I rinsed my brush out, blotted it lightly, but there was some water in here. So this paint is a little bit more fluid than it was right out of the bottle, but it's definitely not thin. Okay, so I'm going to start right at the edge of that mushroom cap, and I'm going to tap and pat, pat, pat a little white section on, and then I'm going to move down here to the next one, and I'm just tapping this on, and it's not creating a completely smooth spot. They've kind of got an interesting little shape to them, and they are shadowed, and they're already looking more 3D. All right, so going right around the top of that mushroom cap, and then just tapping and patting a nice little white spot on my mushroom cap. They're almost like little cloud shapes. And I don't know if that's exactly the way these spots look, but in the pictures I saw, it was close enough for me. And so you can grab your liner brush and start making your little white cloudy shapes on your mushrooms. And we can make these little shapes because our red cap is dry and the paint was absorbing into our unsealed wood. So it makes this much easier to create these little spots on our mushrooms since we don't have to worry about that red. And I'll tell you, once you start putting these little white spots on it, this mushroom just screams, I'm the cutest thing in the forest. All right, I'm going to move up and start doing the same thing on the big mushroom cap up here. And these should not be all the same size or all the same shape or the same distance apart. You've got to have some variety in your little markings on your mushroom cap. Okay, so I've got my little white spots on my mushroom caps, and I'm going to need to leave those alone for just a minute. So I'm going to give you a moment to put you're finished putting your little white spots on, and we're going to turn our attention to our grass. So I'll give you just a minute to keep going, and I'm going to take my number 12 flat brush and clean it out in water. Okay, while you all are finishing up your little white spots on your mushroom caps, I want to let you know that I've added Thicket and medium yellow to my palette. Okay, I think we're ready to move on to our little grass that our mushrooms are growing in. And I want to show you a really cool little trick, or at least I think it's a cool little trick. So my brush is damp. I'm blotting the moisture out of the brush, but there's still a little dampness in the brush. And I'm going to pick up a little bit of Thicket on my number 12 flat brush. And I want to take the brush, hold the handle up toward the ceiling so it is aimed up and down, and I want to tap on my palette until my brush is open at the end, so that when I set my brush down, I get a little mark that looks kind of like an oval. There are little spots there. So stab your palette, and then you get a little open brush. And what I do with this open brush, and this may work out perfectly for you the first time, or it might take a little bit of work to get accustomed to doing this. But with your brush kind of broken open, I set the brush down with no pressure where I want a little bit of grass to be. I set the brush down and I gently flick. And I want to show you exactly what that looks like. Okay, there you can see that little mark I put down. It's already starting to look like grass. So I'm going to do a couple more of these little marks. I'm going to set my brush down and flick up. And all of that's just done with a number 12 flat brush and very little pressure at all. So I tap the brush on the palette to open it up, set the brush down on the painting, touch and flick up, and I start to create the base of my grassy area. And you have to do this with very, very little pressure on the brush, because if you do this with any sort of pressure, you are going to create a big old clump of grass, and we want little patches of light grassy area. And I'm doing this right along the bottom of the mushroom stems where they're coming out of the ground. And then I'm just going to move down and create another little patch of grass. And this creates a really very, very pretty little grassy effect. All right, so there you can see, with minimum effort, I've created a little grassy effect. Now, we're not done with this grassy effect, because I know you're thinking, well, that can't be all he's doing to that grass. I know him too well. All right, so I'm rinsing out my number 8 flat brush. And I'm going to pick up some Thicket, and this is going to be thinned down a little bit. Not really thin, but there's moisture in my brush, so I am thinning out some of the Thicket, and my brush is together so that if I don't put pressure on the brush, I can create a very fine line using my flat brush. So what am I going to do? I'm going to set my brush down on the chisel edge, and using no pressure, I'm going to start creating blades of grass. And some are going to be taller, and some are going to be shorter, and some are going to curve to the right, and others are going to curve to the left. But there you can see where I've started to create those little blades of grass. And I'm not doing them everywhere, but I am doing enough of them to make it look like the grass has some different height to it. And we are creating visual interest in our grass so that the grass is not all the same everywhere. Because if the grass was the same everywhere, that would be very, very boring. And we don't want boring grass. So you can make a couple of these blades of grass pretty tall if you wanted to. And remember, some curve right, some curve left. And it may be easier for you instead of flicking up. Some people might want to turn their plaque upside down and pull this grass toward them. You can do this whichever way that you want to. I think this gives a little bit more casual feel to the grass than trying to do it with a liner brush. But there is some of my dark grass. Now, I'm going to make some lighter grass by picking up medium yellow and mixing that in with my Thicket. And I'm also going to add a tad of white to that so that I create a nice light green color to kind of highlight some of this grass. And I'm going to thin that down just by adding a little bit of water to that. Take the excess off so that I've got just enough on there. And I'm going to just begin to pull up some lighter grass blades. And I'm doing this pretty quick because the grass just is not the star of this painting. It's an anchor point. Okay, so now I've got some dark grass and I've got some light grass. Whew, it was tough. And I know you all, I'm sorry?
Sorry.
That's
Can
okay.
they use a fan brush for the grass? How different would it be?
It would probably be a lot wider. It's more spread out than I have it. They can use a fan brush if they want to. I just think the little number 8 flat brush will give them better blades of grass, but to each his own. All right, so I'm going to rinse out my brush really well, my little number 8 flat. Want to get all the paint out of it. And we've got just one more little thing to do, and then we will be done with our little painting. And what we're going to do is I'm going to take a smidgen of Honeycomb and some berry wine and maybe a little black. And this is all on the edge of the number 8 flat. So I've got a pretty dark color here. And I'm going to show you what I'm going to do. I'm just going to tap right at the edge of the little white spots and then take my finger and tap them. And I'm shading the little white spots just on the left edge. And it doesn't take very much, and I'm just tapping some of that dark color right at the edge of my white spots. That's adding a little shading to the spot and making it a little bit more dimensional. Some spots will get a little more dark color and others will get a little less. But just a little bit on the spot. Some of that's going to trail out over the dark shading that we started our spots with. All right, so you could see that we've shaded our spots now. And that, my dear friends, is our retro mushrooms. So I hope that you had fun painting these little fungi tonight. And if you did, you can post your pictures to the internet. You can use hashtag Make It With Michaels and the hashtag Let's Paint Challenge if you want to post it on the Plaid Crafts Facebook page. So I hope that you enjoyed our little retro mushroom class and that you'll join me the next time I'm teaching here in the Michaels Community Classroom. So thank you all for being with us, and we'll see you next time.